People will tell you that money reveals character. They're wrong. The way people treat someone who has none reveals theirs. The laughter hit me before the champagne did. Sharp. Casual. Effortless. Like everyone in the ballroom had rehearsed it. A second later, cold liquid splashed across the front of my black MAID uniform, soaking through the fabric and dripping onto the polished marble floor beneath my shoes. For a moment, nobody moved. Then the room erupted. Smiles. Smirks. Whispered comments. A few people didn't even bother lowering their voices. I stood frozen beside a table worth more than my entire yearly income, clutching a silver serving tray while 100 pairs of eyes reminded me exactly where I belonged. Or where they thought I belonged. My name is Olivia Bennett. I was 25 years old, and that night I learned that humiliation can be louder than any thunderstorm. The Blackwood Manor Charity Gala happened every spring. Politicians came. Celebrities came. Billionaires came. The kind of people who measured wealth in private jets and vacation homes. I measured life differently. In grocery receipts. Prescription costs. Utility bills. The balance left in my checking account after helping my mother pay for her medications. I worked 6 days a week cleaning rooms, carrying luggage, serving drinks, and smiling through comments that would have made most people quit. But quitting wasn't an option. Not when someone depended on me. "Watch where you're standing next time," a woman's voice said. I looked up. Victoria Harrington. Daughter of a real estate tycoon. Social media darling. Professional expert in making other people feel small. Her designer gown sparkled beneath the crystal chandeliers as she stared down at me. The empty champagne glass still hung loosely from her fingertips. "I'm sorry," I said automatically. The apology tasted bitter. I wasn't even sure what I was apologizing for. Her friends laughed again. One of them shook her head dramatically. Honestly, why do they let staff walk around during the main event? More laughter. My cheeks burned. But I kept my eyes down. That's what experience teaches you. Sometimes survival means swallowing words you wish you could say. I crouched and reached for a towel from the service cart nearby. The music continued. Conversations resumed. The room moved on as if nothing had happened. As if I wasn't standing there with champagne dripping from my sleeves. As if I wasn't a person at all. Just part of the furniture. A background detail. A maid. I wiped the floor carefully. One hand trembled. I hated that it trembled. Because it meant they had gotten to me. And I promised myself years ago that nobody would have that power anymore. "You missed a spot." Another voice. Another laugh. I took a slow breath and kept cleaning. The scent of expensive perfume mixed with champagne and fresh roses filled the air. Somewhere beyond the ballroom windows, rain tapped softly against the glass. The city lights stretched across the horizon like scattered diamonds. Beautiful. Distant. Untouchable. Just like the people in this room. When I finally stood again, I adjusted my uniform and forced myself to smile. Not because I felt strong. Because I refused to let them see me break. Then something changed. I felt it before I saw it. The atmosphere shifted. Conversations lowered. Heads turned. A path quietly opened through the crowd near the grand staircase. I followed everyone's gaze. A man had just entered the ballroom. Tall. Impeccably dressed. Calm in a way that made everyone else seem nervous. Alexander Blackwood. Billionaire. Founder of Blackwood Holdings. Owner of the estate where I worked. The most powerful man in the room. My eyes met his for less than a second. Long enough to notice that he wasn't looking at the politicians. Or the celebrities. Or Victoria Harrington. He was looking directly at me. And for the first time all night, nobody was laughing. I could still feel Alexander Blackwood's eyes on me long after I looked away. It was ridiculous. Men like him did not notice women like me. They noticed board members, investors, and people whose last names appeared on buildings. Not maids carrying serving trays through crowded ballrooms. I told myself I was imagining it as I pushed through the service door and stepped into the quieter hallway behind the grand event space. The sound of laughter faded. The scent of roses disappeared. For the first time all evening, I could breathe. I set the empty tray onto a stainless steel counter and stared down at the champagne stain spreading across my uniform. The fabric would need special cleaning. Another expense. Another problem. I closed my eyes for a second. Just 1 second. Then I got back to work. That was how my life functioned. Keep moving. Keep working. Keep going. At 11:30 that night, the gala finally ended. Luxury cars disappeared down the long driveway. Ballet attendants headed home. The musicians packed their instruments. I spent another hour helping clean crystal glasses and folding table linens before driving across town in my 12-year-old sedan. The dashboard light flickered again. I ignored it. There were more urgent things to worry about. The small apartment building where my mother and I lived sat between a laundromat and a convenience store. Nothing fancy. Nothing impressive. But it was home. I unlocked the door as quietly as possible. The living room lamp was still on. My mother had fallen asleep in her recliner again. A blanket rested across her lap. An unfinished crossword puzzle sat on the side table. My chest tightened. She looked smaller than I remembered. Illness had a way of stealing pieces of people. Slowly. Quietly. I knelt beside her chair and adjusted the blanket around her shoulders. Her eyes opened immediately. They always did. "Olivia," she whispered. "You are home late." I smiled. "Big event." She noticed the stain on my uniform before I could hide it. Mothers always noticed everything. "Long night?" she asked. I considered telling her about Victoria. About the laughter. About standing in a room full of people who looked through me as if I did not exist. Instead I shook my head. Nothing I could not handle. She studied me for a moment. Then she reached for my hand. Her fingers felt fragile. "One day people will see what I see." I laughed softly. "And what is that?" Her smile never wavered. "The strongest woman I know." I looked away before she could see my eyes fill with tears. The next morning arrived too quickly. By 7 o'clock I was back at Blackwood Manor. The estate stretched across dozens of acres outside the city, larger than some neighborhoods. I was carrying fresh linens through the east corridor when 2 housekeepers rushed past me whispering excitedly. "Did you hear?" one asked. "Hear what?" I said. Both women stopped. Their eyes widened. "Alexander Blackwood requested a staff report this morning." I frowned. "Why?" The older woman lowered her voice. "Nobody knows." Then she looked directly at me. "But your name was the first one he asked for." My stomach dropped. "There has to be some mistake," I said. The 2 housekeepers exchanged a look. Neither of them seemed convinced. "That is what we heard," the older woman replied. "His assistant requested personnel files from Human Resources this morning. Yours was first." Then they hurried away, leaving me alone in the corridor with a stack of freshly pressed linens and 100 questions racing through my mind. The rest of the morning felt strange. Every time I passed another employee, I caught them glancing at me. Some looked curious. Others looked jealous. A few looked worried on my behalf. By noon, I was helping prepare the West Garden for a private luncheon scheduled later that afternoon. The sky was bright blue. A warm breeze carried the scent of freshly cut grass and blooming hydrangeas. The kind of day that belonged on a postcard. I was arranging chairs near a stone fountain when I heard quiet crying. At first, I thought I imagined it. Then I heard it again. A small voice. frightened. Alone. I followed the sound past a row of hedges until I found a little boy sitting beside a marble statue. He could not have been older than 6. Blonde hair. Blue eyes. Expensive clothes that looked slightly rumpled now. Tears clung to his eyelashes. "Hey there," I said softly. "Are you okay?" The boy immediately looked away. His lower lip trembled. I crouched a few feet away, careful not to overwhelm him. "You do not have to talk if you do not want to." He remained silent. "My name is Olivia." Still nothing. I glanced around. No parents. No security. No guests searching nearby. Just a scared little boy trying very hard not to cry. I reached into my apron pocket and found a wrapped peppermint I kept for long shifts. "Want one?" He hesitated before nodding. "Progress." I handed it over. His tiny fingers unwrapped it carefully. "You know," I said, settling onto the grass beside him, "when I was little, I used to get lost all the time." That earned a quick glance. "Really?" he asked quietly. "Really?" He smiled a little. Just a little. But it was enough. For the next 15 minutes, we talked about everything except why he was upset. Baseball. Dogs. Ice cream flavors. The fountain. Clouds. The kind of conversations children trust more than questions. Eventually he admitted he had wandered away looking for the garden maze and could not find his family afterward. "That happens to grown-ups too," I said. "Trust me." He laughed. A real laugh this time. The sound felt like sunlight. Then a deep voice spoke from behind us. "There you are." The boy jumped to his feet. Relief flooded his face. I turned around and immediately recognized the man standing a few yards away. Alexander Blackwood. His tailored navy suit looked effortless beneath the afternoon sun. But it was not his appearance that caught my attention. It was the expression on his face. The concern. The genuine relief when he looked at the child. The boy ran toward him without hesitation. Alexander rested a hand on his shoulder before lifting his eyes to me. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then he glanced at the smiling child beside him and said something I never expected. "Thank you, Olivia. You seem to have a gift for finding what other people overlook." The rest of the afternoon should have felt ordinary. It did not. Alexander's words followed me everywhere. "You seem to have a gift for finding what other people overlook." Nobody had ever said anything like that to me before. Most people noticed what I lacked. Money. Status. Connections. They never noticed the things I spent years trying to protect. Kindness. Patience. Dignity. By 4 o'clock, the estate was buzzing again. Another private event. Another gathering of wealthy guests who arrived in luxury cars and stepped into Blackwood Manor as if the world belonged to them. Maybe it did. I spent the next several hours carrying trays, setting tables, and making sure every detail looked perfect. The work was exhausting, but familiar. Familiar felt safe. Around 6, I was arranging fresh flowers near the main dining room when I heard a sharp voice behind me. "Careful with those." I turned and immediately saw Victoria Harrington. Her flawless smile never reached her eyes. 3 of her friends stood beside her. They looked amused already. That was never a good sign. "The arrangements are worth more than your monthly salary," Victoria said lightly. Her friends laughed. I kept adjusting the flowers. "I will be careful." "You should be." She stepped closer. It would be terrible if someone made another scene. More laughter. The reference was obvious. The champagne incident. I felt heat rise into my cheeks. Not because I was embarrassed anymore. Because I was tired. Tired of people who treated cruelty like entertainment. But I said nothing. Silence had become a skill. Victoria tilted her head. You know, Olivia, I almost admire you. I looked up. Admire me? Of course. Most people would quit after being humiliated in front of an entire ballroom. Her friends exchanged knowing smiles. Yet here you are. She sounded disappointed. As if my refusal to break somehow annoyed her. I simply nodded and returned to my work. That seemed to frustrate her even more. Eventually she walked away. The laughter faded with her. One of the kitchen assistants approached after they disappeared. How do you do that? She asked quietly. Do what? Stay calm. I looked down at the flowers in my hands. White roses. Freshly cut. Delicate. I do not always feel calm. She smiled sadly. Could have fooled me. Later that evening, I found myself helping an elderly guest navigate a staircase after he misplaced his cane. Then I helped a catering employee carry supplies across the property when one of the wheels broke on her cart. Then I spent 15 minutes searching for a missing hearing aid belonging to another guest. Small things. Ordinary things. Nobody noticed. Nobody except, apparently, Alexander Blackwood. Near 9 o'clock, I stepped outside onto a quiet terrace to catch my breath. The air felt cool against my skin. The city lights shimmered in the distance. For the first time all day, there was silence. Then a familiar voice spoke behind me. You spend a lot of time helping people. I turned. Alexander stood near the doorway. His expression was thoughtful. Observant. The kind of expression that made me feel as though he saw more than he should. I gave a small shrug. Sometimes people need help. Even when nobody is watching? I smiled faintly. Especially then. Something changed in his eyes. Not surprise. Recognition. As though he had just found the answer to a question he had been asking himself. Then his phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen. His expression immediately hardened. Not angry. Concerned. Serious. He looked back at me. Enjoy the quiet while you can, Olivia. What does that mean? For a second, he seemed about to answer. Then he slipped the phone into his pocket. Tomorrow is going to be a very long day. The next morning began before sunrise. The estate was already awake when I arrived. Delivery trucks rolled through the front gates. Florists carried arrangements through the grand entrance. Event coordinators rushed across marble floors with clipboards in hand. Something important was happening. I could feel it. By 8 o'clock, I learned why. A private investment summit was being held at Blackwood Manor. Some of the most influential business leaders in the country would be attending. The pressure showed on everyone's faces. Every detail had to be perfect. Every table setting had to be aligned. Every guest had to be comfortable. I spent most of the morning moving between conference rooms, carrying coffee trays and helping the catering staff prepare refreshments. Around noon, the main ballroom filled with executives dressed in tailored suits. The air smelled like fresh coffee, polished wood, and expensive cologne. Conversations echoed beneath crystal chandeliers. Numbers. Investments. Acquisitions. Deals worth more money than I could imagine. I was delivering a tray of bottled water near the front of the room when I noticed an older gentleman seated beside the stage. He looked familiar. Silver hair. Distinguished posture. One of the major investors, I guessed. At first nothing seemed unusual. Then I noticed him loosen his tie. His face had lost color. One hand pressed lightly against his chest. The tray nearly slipped from my fingers. Something was wrong. People around him remained focused on the presentation. Nobody noticed. I set the tray down and walked toward him. Sir? I asked quietly. He looked up. His breathing seemed strained. Are you feeling all right? He attempted a smile but it disappeared almost immediately. A bead of sweat rolled down his temple. My stomach tightened. Years of helping care for my mother had taught me to pay attention to small changes. Small signs mattered. "I think we should get you seated somewhere more comfortable," I said gently. He nodded. I immediately signaled one of the event coordinators and asked her to contact medical personnel stationed on the property. Within moments, several staff members arrived to assist. The investor remained conscious and responsive, but it was clear he needed attention. The presentation stopped. Conversations died away. Concern spread through the ballroom. Medical professionals arrived quickly and escorted him to a private room for evaluation. Only after everything settled did I realize how fast my heart was beating. I stepped back against a wall and finally exhaled. My hands trembled slightly. Not from fear. From relief. The situation had been handled. That was what mattered. As guests resumed their discussions, I turned to leave. Then I noticed someone watching me from across the ballroom. Alexander Blackwood. He stood near the stage speaking with two executives. Yet his attention was fixed entirely on me. Not curious. Not casual. Intent. As though he had witnessed every second. One of the executives said something to him. Alexander never looked away. Then the investor's personal assistant hurried into the ballroom. Tears filled her eyes as she thanked the staff for responding so quickly. "You may have saved his life by noticing the warning signs early," she said. Several people turned toward me. The attention made me uncomfortable. I lowered my eyes immediately. But when I looked up again, Alexander was already walking in my direction. Alexander stopped a few feet in front of me. The conversations around us continued, but they sounded distant now. Muted. Like I was hearing them through a wall. I suddenly became very aware of the tray still sitting on the nearby table and the fact that my uniform probably looked less than perfect after a 12-hour shift. "The doctors said your quick response made a difference," he said. His voice remained calm, steady, impossible to ignore. I shifted uncomfortably. I just noticed he did not look well. Most people did not. His eyes never left mine. Most people were too busy paying attention to themselves. I did not know how to respond to that. Fortunately, someone called his name from across the ballroom. An executive wanted his attention. A photographer waited nearby. Important people always seemed to need something from Alexander Blackwood. He glanced toward them, then back at me. "Enjoy the rest of your evening, Olivia." Then he walked away. The moment he disappeared into the crowd, I released a breath I had not realized I was holding. The following week passed quickly. Too quickly. Yet something had changed. Small things at first. A supervisor suddenly approved my request for a schedule adjustment so I could attend one of my mother's medical appointments. The maintenance department fixed the broken heater in our employee break room after months of complaints. The catering manager even thanked me publicly for helping during the summit. None of it made sense. Blackwood Manor was efficient, but it was not usually attentive. Then another strange thing happened. I arrived one morning and found a bouquet of white roses sitting beside the employee coffee station. No card. No name. Just fresh flowers. Everyone admired them. Nobody knew who sent them. 3 days later, another bouquet appeared. This time yellow roses. Then a week later, lilies. The staff began joking about a secret admirer. I laughed along with everyone else. The idea seemed ridiculous. My life was bills, responsibilities, and long workdays. There was no room for mystery. Still, I noticed something unusual whenever the flowers arrived. Alexander happened to be on the property every single time. One afternoon I was helping organize storage inventory when I overheard two senior administrators talking near the office doorway. They did not realize I could hear them. He requested her personnel file twice. My hand froze over a clipboard. "Twice?" the second person asked. "Why?" "No idea. But he asked about her family situation too. My pulse quickened. They were talking about me. They had to be. Before I could hear more, they noticed my presence and immediately changed the subject. The rest of the day felt strange. Questions followed me everywhere. Why would a billionaire care about an employee file? Why would he ask about my family? Why would he notice me at all? That evening I stopped by my mother's apartment after work. She was feeling stronger than usual and insisted on making dinner. The smell of homemade chicken soup filled the kitchen. For the first time in weeks, she looked genuinely happy. Halfway through the meal, she smiled at me over her bowl. Something is different. I nearly dropped my spoon. Different how? You smile more lately. I laughed softly. I do not. You do. Her smile widened. And I think someone is giving you a reason. Before I could answer, my phone buzzed on the table. A message from my supervisor appeared on the screen. Olivia, Mr. Blackwood would like to meet with you tomorrow morning. My heart stopped for a second. Then started beating twice as fast. The next morning, I arrived 30 minutes early. Not because I wanted to impress anyone. Because there was no chance I would be able to focus otherwise. My mind had spent the entire night replaying that message. Mr. Blackwood would like to meet with you tomorrow morning. Every possible explanation had crossed my mind. None of them made sense. At exactly 9 o'clock, I was escorted to a private office on the second floor of the manor. The room was larger than my entire apartment. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the gardens. Shelves lined with books covered one wall. Sunlight spilled across polished wood floors. Everything felt expensive. Everything felt intimidating. Alexander stood near the windows when I entered. He turned as the assistant closed the door behind me. Olivia. I swallowed. Mr. Blackwood. He smiled slightly. Please sit. I perched carefully on the edge of a chair. My hands rested in my lap. Alexander returned to his desk. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then he opened a folder. I reviewed your employment record. My stomach tightened immediately. Is there a problem? No. His answer came quickly. Quite the opposite. He closed the folder. Your supervisors consistently describe you as dependable, professional, and exceptionally kind. I looked down. Compliments always made me uncomfortable. I just do my job. That seems to be your favorite answer. I glanced up. There was amusement in his eyes. Because it is true. Alexander studied me for a moment. Then his expression became serious. Your mother has been dealing with health issues. My breath caught. How do you know that? Human Resources informed me after I asked about employee support programs. The explanation sounded reasonable. Yet something about it felt incomplete. Why? I asked quietly. He leaned back slightly. Because people matter. I almost laughed. Not because it was funny. Because nobody with power ever seemed to believe that. Most people do not spend time investigating the personal lives of their employees. Most people are making a mistake. The room fell silent. Then Alexander slid a document across the desk. Blackwood Holdings recently expanded an employee assistance fund. I would like to cover your mother's remaining medical expenses. I stared at the paper. My heart pounded. The amount listed was more money than I could save in years. For a moment, I could not speak. Relief washed through me first. Then gratitude. Then something else. Pride. The kind that hurts. Slowly, I pushed the document back across the desk. Alexander frowned slightly. No? No. Olivia. His voice softened. This is not charity. Maybe not. I met his eyes. But it still feels like something I did not earn. He seemed genuinely surprised. You think helping people is not enough to earn help yourself? I looked away toward the gardens outside. I think I need to stand on my own feet. The words came quietly. But I meant every one of them. Alexander was silent for several seconds. Long enough that I wondered if I had offended him. Finally, he nodded. Most people would have accepted immediately. I know. Another pause. Then the corner of his mouth lifted slightly. That is exactly why I offered. Before I could respond, a knock sounded at the office door. An assistant stepped inside looking concerned. Sir, Miss Harrington has arrived unexpectedly. Alexander's expression changed instantly. Not anger. Frustration. The assistant shifted nervously. And she does not seem happy. The moment I heard Victoria Harrington's name, I stood. I should go. Alexander's eyes remained on the door for a second before he nodded. Probably a wise decision. There was something almost amused in his voice. I managed a small smile and left the office before the situation could become any more uncomfortable. Unfortunately, fate seemed to have other plans. I had barely reached the end of the hallway when the elevator doors opened. Victoria stepped out wearing a cream-colored designer dress that probably cost more than my car. Her confidence entered the room before she did. Two friends followed behind her carrying shopping bags and matching smiles. Then she saw me. Her expression froze. For a brief moment, confusion crossed her face. Then understanding. Then irritation. Olivia. She said my name as though it were something unpleasant she had discovered on her shoe. Miss Harrington. I kept walking. Interesting. Her voice stopped me. I just came from downstairs. They told me Alexander was in a private meeting. I said nothing. With you. Her friends exchanged looks. Victoria folded her arms. What exactly could a billionaire possibly need from a maid? I felt every eye in the hallway turn toward us. Staff members suddenly found reasons to move slower. People always enjoyed watching someone else become uncomfortable. You would have to ask him, I replied. The answer only made her smile disappear completely. Careful. Her tone softened. Somehow that felt worse. People start getting strange ideas when they forget their place. I should have walked away immediately. Instead, I looked directly at her. I know exactly where my place is. Something flashed across her face. Surprise, perhaps. Most people expected me to lower my eyes. To apologize. To retreat. I did none of those things. Eventually she stepped aside. Good. I continued down the hallway. My heart raced the entire way to the service wing. By lunchtime, the story had spread through half the estate. Olivia had a private meeting with Alexander Blackwood. Nobody knew why. Nobody stopped speculating. The whispers followed me through every corridor. Some employees seemed happy for me. Others looked suspicious. A few treated me as though I had suddenly become someone else. I hated all of it. By evening, preparations began for another major event scheduled that weekend. One of the largest charity galas of the year. Guests would be arriving from across the country. The entire manor transformed overnight. Crystal chandeliers were polished. New floral arrangements arrived. Security increased. Everything sparkled. 2 days later, I was helping arrange place cards in the ballroom when Victoria appeared again. This time she was not alone. Several influential guests stood nearby. The perfect audience. She approached one of the display tables and picked up a seating chart. Amazing, she said loudly. A few weeks ago she was carrying trays. Now she is practically running the place. Laughter followed. I kept working. Maybe next week she will be sitting at the head table. More laughter. My hands tightened around a stack of place cards. Not because I was angry. Because I was tired. Tired of proving that kindness was not weakness. Tired of being treated like entertainment. Then Victoria leaned closer and lowered her voice. Whatever game you think you are playing with Alexander, it will not end the way you hope. I looked up slowly. There is no game. She smiled. Cold. Certain. We will see. Then she turned and walked away. But as she disappeared into the crowd, I noticed something strange. She glanced toward a velvet jewelry display positioned near the stage. And for the first time since I met her, Victoria Harrington looked nervous. The charity gala arrived on Saturday evening. Blackwood Manor glowed beneath thousands of lights. Luxury cars lined the circular driveway. Guests filled the ballroom wearing designer gowns and tailored suits. Music floated through the air. Crystal sparkled beneath the chandeliers. Everything looked perfect. Too perfect. I should have trusted that feeling. From the moment I arrived, something felt wrong. Conversation stopped when I walked past. Employees exchanged strange looks. Even the event coordinator seemed distracted whenever she spoke to me. Still, I focused on my work. That was what I always did. By 8 o'clock, the ballroom was crowded. Wealth and influence filled every corner of the room. I was carrying a tray of champagne when I noticed Victoria standing near the jewelry display again. The same display she had stared at days earlier. The centerpiece was a diamond necklace being auctioned later that evening for charity. Security guards monitored it constantly. Victoria caught me looking. She smiled. Then she turned away. An hour later, everything changed. The music stopped abruptly. A murmur spread through the crowd. Several security guards moved quickly toward the stage. Guests began whispering. Confusion rippled across the ballroom. I set down my tray and looked around. One of the event managers appeared pale. Another spoke urgently into a radio. Then an announcement came. Ladies and gentlemen, we apologize for the interruption. A valuable item appears to be missing. The room erupted with questions. Security immediately closed the exits. My stomach tightened. The missing item was the diamond necklace. Within minutes, staff members and guests were being asked to remain where they were while security reviewed the situation. The atmosphere changed completely. Suspicion replaced celebration. Then I heard my name. Olivia Bennett. I turned. A security supervisor was approaching. We need you to come with us. Every eye in the room shifted toward me. My pulse began to race. Why? I asked quietly. The supervisor hesitated. Then he held up a small velvet jewelry box. This was found in your employee locker. For a second, I forgot how to breathe. What? The missing necklace was inside. The ballroom fell silent. Absolute silence. I stared at the box. My mind struggled to process the words. None of it made sense. I had never touched the necklace. I had barely been near the display. There has been a mistake, I said. My voice sounded distant. Unfamiliar. I did not take anything. Nobody answered. I looked around the room. Some guests seemed shocked. Others looked disappointed, as though their suspicions had finally been confirmed. Then I saw Victoria. Standing near the front. Watching everything unfold. Her expression was carefully controlled. But beneath it, I saw satisfaction. Tiny. Brief. Enough. The realization hit me immediately. This was not an accident. I did not steal it, I repeated. The words felt weak against the weight of the accusation. The supervisor lowered his eyes. Until the investigation is complete, we have to suspend your employment. The sentence landed harder than anything else. Not because of the job. Because of what it implied. Around me, whispers began spreading through the crowd. The maid. Of course. Money. Desperation. People always found it easy to believe the worst about someone without power. I felt humiliation rising like a wave. But I refused to cry. Not here. Not in front of them. Then, across the ballroom, I saw Alexander Blackwood pushing through the crowd. His expression was unlike anything I had ever seen before. And for the first time that night, Victoria Harrington looked afraid. The ballroom remained silent long after Alexander reached the center of the room. Hundreds of guests watched him. Investors. Politicians. Executives. People whose opinions shaped entire industries. None of them spoke. Alexander looked first at the velvet box in the security supervisor's hands. Then at me. Then at Victoria. His expression revealed nothing. That was somehow more intimidating than anger. "Explain exactly what happened," he said. The supervisor cleared his throat. "The necklace disappeared approximately 20 minutes ago. During the search, it was discovered inside Miss Bennet's employee locker." Alexander nodded once. "And who had access to that locker?" The question seemed to catch everyone off guard. "Several employees have access to the staff area," the supervisor admitted. "So no one actually witnessed Olivia taking the necklace?" Silence. "No." Alexander folded his arms. "Then what you have is an accusation. Not proof." A murmur spread through the crowd. For the first time all evening, the certainty surrounding my guilt began to crack. Victoria shifted uncomfortably. It was subtle. Most people missed it. I did not. Alexander noticed too. I could tell. "Review the security footage," he said calmly. "Immediately." The supervisor hesitated. "Sir, we already checked the cameras near the display." "Not the display." Alexander's voice remained steady. "The employee corridors. The locker area. Every hallway." 20 minutes later, a private conference room had been transformed into an investigation center. Several security officers reviewed recordings while key staff members waited nearby. I sat quietly in a chair near the wall. My hands rested tightly in my lap. Alexander remained standing the entire time. Watching. Waiting. Refusing to leave. The minutes felt endless. Then one of the officers suddenly leaned forward. "Sir." Every head turned. The screen displayed a hallway outside the employee lockers. Timestamps flashed in the corner. Staff members moved through the corridor throughout the evening. Then a familiar figure appeared. Victoria Harrington. The room froze. Victoria stopped walking, glanced around carefully, and disappeared into the employee section. Several minutes later, she emerged alone. Holding nothing. But smiling. The footage continued. 15 minutes later, security discovered the necklace. Nobody spoke. Nobody needed to. The truth sat on the screen for everyone to see. Victoria's face drained of color. "This proves nothing," she said quickly. "I was looking for a restroom." Another officer switched to a different camera angle. The hallway leading toward guest facilities. Victoria had never gone anywhere near it. More silence. Then another recording appeared. This one showed Victoria carrying the velvet box before entering the staff corridor. The room seemed to stop breathing. My chest tightened. Not from relief. From disbelief. She had really done it. All of it. Every insult. Every accusation. Every carefully planned humiliation. Alexander finally spoke. "I believe we are finished here." His voice was quiet. Yet nobody challenged it. Victoria looked around desperately. The confidence she wore like armor had vanished. Her friends stared at the floor. The security supervisor immediately apologized to me. Then another manager apologized. Then another. The words blurred together. I barely heard them. Because Alexander had already crossed the room and stopped in front of me. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then he offered me his hand. Olivia. His eyes never left mine. It is time everyone heard the truth. My hand trembled slightly as I accepted his. The room around us seemed unreal. Just an hour earlier, those same people had looked at me with suspicion. Now they avoided my eyes entirely. Shame moved through the crowd faster than gossip ever had. Alexander helped me to my feet and guided me back toward the ballroom. Nobody stopped us. Nobody dared. The grand room looked different now. Not because anything had changed physically. The chandeliers still sparkled. The orchestra still waited quietly near the stage. The flowers still filled the air with their sweet fragrance. What had changed was the way people looked at me. For the first time, they were paying attention. Alexander stepped onto the stage and picked up a microphone. The room immediately fell silent. Hundreds of guests turned toward him. Investors. Executives. Media representatives. Some of the most influential people in the state. He stood calmly beneath the lights and waited until every conversation disappeared. Then he spoke. Tonight, a serious mistake was made. His voice carried easily across the ballroom. An innocent employee was publicly accused without evidence. The silence deepened. Nobody moved. Many people were quick to assume guilt. His eyes swept across the room. Not because of facts. Because of position. Several guests lowered their heads. Others shifted uncomfortably. Alexander continued. Olivia Bennet has worked at Blackwood Manor with integrity, professionalism, and compassion. She has repeatedly helped guests, employees, and even complete strangers without expecting recognition. I felt my face grow warm. Every instinct urged me to disappear. Yet I could not look away. The investigation revealed the truth. Alexander's tone remained steady. But the truth should never have required an investigation in the first place. A ripple of discomfort moved through the audience. He was right. They all knew it. They had believed the accusation because it was easier than questioning their assumptions. Then something unexpected happened. Alexander turned toward me. Not toward the crowd. Not toward the executives. Toward me. Olivia. My heart skipped. Please come up here. I hesitated. Every eye followed me as I slowly joined him on the stage. The ballroom suddenly felt enormous. Alexander looked at the audience before speaking again. Over the past several weeks, I have watched this woman help people when nobody was watching. I have seen her show kindness to strangers. I have seen her remain respectful when others were not. I have seen strength disguised as humility. The room remained completely silent. And tonight, many people owe her an apology. One by one, guests began to clap. Slowly at first. Then louder. Then louder still. The sound filled the ballroom. Not polite applause. Genuine applause. I felt tears sting my eyes. Not because they were cheering. Because for the first time in a very long time, someone had stood beside me instead of looking past me. The applause continued until Alexander raised his hand. Then he leaned slightly closer. Only I could hear his next words. You were right to refuse my help. I looked up at him. Confused. He smiled softly. Because you never needed saving, Olivia. Then his expression changed. Not serious. Not formal. Something warmer. Something that made my pulse quicken. But there is something I have wanted to ask you for a very long time. The ballroom seemed to disappear around me. The applause. The music. The conversations. Everything faded into the background as I stared at Alexander. My heart was beating so fast I could barely hear anything else. A long time? I managed to ask. A smile touched the corner of his mouth. Longer than you think. The audience watched silently. Nobody wanted to miss what happened next. Alexander took a slow breath and looked out across the room before returning his attention to me. When I first noticed you, it was not because you stood out. A few guests exchanged confused glances. He continued. It was because you never tried to. The room remained completely still. You treated every person with kindness. Whether they were important or unknown. Whether they could help you or not. You never changed. I felt my throat tighten. Most people spend their lives trying to be noticed, he said softly. You spent yours helping others feel seen. The words hit harder than any compliment I had ever received. Because they felt true. Alexander reached into his jacket pocket. A collective gasp moved through the ballroom. My pulse instantly doubled. No. Surely not. Yet somehow I already knew. He held a small velvet box in his hand. Not the same one from earlier. A different one. Simpler. Elegant. Real. For the first time since I met him, Alexander Blackwood looked nervous. The realization stunned me. This was a man who negotiated billion-dollar deals without hesitation. A man who commanded every room he entered. Yet right now, standing in front of me, he looked vulnerable. Human. Honest. Olivia Bennet, he said quietly. You taught me something I did not realize I needed to learn. My eyes filled with tears. You taught me that strength does not need attention. That dignity cannot be purchased. That character matters more than status. The ballroom was silent enough to hear a pin drop. Then Alexander did something nobody expected. He lowered himself onto one knee. A shocked murmur swept through the crowd. I covered my mouth with both hands. My vision blurred immediately. I know this is unexpected, he said. And I know you never wanted anything from me except respect. He opened the box. A beautiful ring caught the light beneath the chandeliers. That is why I trust you with something far more valuable than money. His voice softened. My heart. Tears slipped down my cheeks. I could not stop them. I no longer wanted to. Olivia, will you marry me? For a second, the world stood still. Every humiliation. Every long shift. Every sacrifice. Every lonely night worrying about bills. Every moment of feeling invisible. It all seemed to lead here. Not because of wealth. Not because of the ring. Because someone finally saw me exactly as I was. And chose me anyway. I looked down at the man kneeling before me. The man who had defended me when it mattered. The man who listened. The man who noticed. The answer had been in my heart long before he asked the question. I laughed through my tears. Then nodded. Yes. The ballroom exploded with applause. But Alexander never looked away from me. Neither did I. As he slipped the ring onto my finger, I thought the night could not possibly become more unforgettable. I was wrong. Because at that exact moment, the grand entrance doors opened, and someone I never expected to see stepped inside. The applause was still echoing through the ballroom when I turned toward the entrance. For a moment, I could not understand what I was seeing. Then my breath caught. My mother stood in the doorway. She wore a simple blue dress I had never seen before. Her silver hair was neatly styled. Her smile trembled as tears filled her eyes. The entire room seemed to disappear again. I stepped off the stage without thinking and hurried toward her. Mom? My voice broke. She opened her arms and I hugged her tightly. For several seconds neither of us spoke. We simply held on to each other. When I finally pulled back, she reached up and touched my cheek. I almost missed it, she whispered. Not a chance, Alexander said from behind us. I turned. He had followed quietly. My mother looked at him and smiled knowingly. So you are the man who sees my daughter the way I always hoped someone would. Alexander's expression softened. I am trying to be. My mother nodded approvingly. Around us, guests watched the exchange in silence. Some smiled. Others wiped away tears. The tension that had filled the evening was gone. In its place was something warmer. Something real. 3 months later, sunlight poured across the gardens of Blackwood Manor. White roses lined the pathways. Music drifted through the summer air. Friends, employees, and family gathered beneath a canopy of flowers. The wedding was beautiful, but not because it was extravagant. It was beautiful because it felt honest. I stood beneath the archway and looked out at the crowd. Many faces were familiar. Some belonged to people who had supported me. Some belonged to people who once overlooked me. Life had a funny way of bringing everyone together eventually. I noticed several employees from the manor smiling proudly in the front row. I noticed the little boy I had helped weeks ago waving enthusiastically from beside his family. Then I noticed something else. Several seats near the back remained empty. Victoria Harrington was not there. Neither were the friends who had laughed the loudest. For the first time, I realized I felt no anger toward them. No bitterness. No desire for revenge. Carrying resentment would only keep me connected to the worst moments of my life. I wanted something better. I wanted peace. Alexander took my hands as the ceremony began. His eyes held the same quiet certainty I had come to trust. The same look he gave me the first time he truly saw me. When the vows were finished and the applause filled the garden, I glanced toward my mother. Tears streamed down her face. She was smiling so hard it looked like her heart might burst. Mine felt the same. Later that evening, as the sun disappeared beyond the horizon and golden light settled across the estate, I stood beside Alexander on the terrace overlooking the gardens. The world felt calm. Finally calm. He slipped his hand into mine. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. I smiled. That people spent so much time judging the uniform I wore. Alexander kissed my forehead gently. And? I looked out across the lights below. The right person looked past it. Sometimes the world mistakes a person's circumstances for their value. But the people who matter most never fall for that illusion. They see the heart underneath. And that changes everything.